Crowds gathered outside the White House this afternoon to demand action after just the latest mass murders in our country. Representatives of more than 100 organizations are calling for Congress to act on what they call the rise of white supremacist terror and common sense gun reforms. And one man getting a lot of the blame is Senate President Mitch McConnell, who blocked a vote on a House-passed bill to expand background checks back in February.
Mitch McConnell needs to get off his ass and do something. People are getting killed in the streets in America, and nobody's acting. Nobody.
Let us have a special session to address gun violence in America, and let us finally have the courage to take on the NRA.
Ohio's conservative Republican Governor Mike DeWine spoke out today on the need for gun reform as well, calling on state lawmakers to pass background checks and a so-called red flag law, which would let a court temporarily take away guns from people who are deemed a risk.
We have to empower people to get help for family or loved ones who may be a danger to themselves or a danger to others.
Here in Massachusetts, we already have a law like that, as well as strict rules around background checks and assault weapons ban as well. Part of the reason we're known for having some of the toughest gun laws in the country. Joined now by the woman in charge of enforcing them, Attorney General Maura Healey. Attorney General, it's good to see you.
Good to be with you, Jim.
You've just decried both the acts and the lack of action in response, but realistically, with a Republican-controlled Senate led by Mitch McConnell, absolutely nothing is going to happen, is it?
Well, I hope that's not the case, and I hope that more people continue to come forward. I hope more Republicans continue to come forward and demand action. This is about gun violence, and this is about addressing what is an outrageous pattern of gun violence in this country that really has no comparison when you look across the world. Mm-hmm. But, Jim, tonight it's also about the serious issue that we face in this country with regard to white supremacy, the rise of this hate and vitriol. It's serious. You look at the numbers, you look at the statistics of mass shootings over the last few years, and so many are attributable to this sort of activity online. Unfortunately, and I want to be perfectly clear, we have in the White House a person who enables and who instigates, and who has yet to exercise the leadership that is necessary. He's not capable of exercising the leadership. In the face of that, we as Americans need to come together, Democrat and Republican. We need governors, we need AGs, we need people all across the board demanding action, and certainly demanding that Mitch McConnell, who's proven to be an incredibly selfish individual who's really just set on holding his own power, he needs to step forward and act right now.
Is Donald Trump a white supremacist, Attorney General?
He's certainly a racist, and he's certainly enabled, in my view, and fomented much of this activity in the last few years. His look at the use of his language, even relatedly, the use of the term invasion and where that is cribbed from, that is directly tied to those who are xenophobic, who are all about advancing a white agenda, a white supremacist agenda in this country. And so, you know, I'll leave labels aside, but I think the actions speak for themselves. And his failure to denounce, repudiate action, and of course his failure to do anything about it speaks for itself.
He did repudiate white supremacists and bigots yesterday.
Did you believe that?
Well, the issue is not do I believe it. Do the American people believe it?
I don't
buy it. Do you believe it?
No, he read off a teleprompter. He was pained reading it. It's not real. It's not the real words of Donald Trump. The real words of Donald Trump are, I think, reflected in his tweets. And again, this is about the need for others to take action, because we actually can take action ourselves collectively. We don't need the president to act. We also need...
What does that mean?
Congress can do its job, and Congress can override vetoes. And you know what else can happen, Jim? We've got market power here. We've got CEOs of Walmart, of Microsoft, of other entities. Look at what Salesforce's CEO did in saying that wasn't going to do business with certain entities that weren't conducting background checks with respect to gun sales. There are other levers out there. There are other ways to act. But I think this is about mass shootings and gun violence, certainly, but it's also about the increase of this incredibly intolerant sentiment that is led to serious devastation and violence. I think that will only continue until we take all action necessary to stop it.
You said you don't want to brand him. You called him a racist, but you wouldn't call him a white supremacist. Is he not the latter? Is that why you didn't?
Well, I'll leave it to sociologists and others to come up with those terms. But I certainly think if you look at his policies and the pain and the fear that so many people of color in this country, in Massachusetts, in Boston today, tonight, feel, experience, that's unconscionable. And I think that I, as a person in elected office, should be doing everything I can to fight that, to stop that.
You know, I mentioned Mike DeWine a minute ago. Before he was governor, and in between, he was a congressperson when I met him many years ago. He was the Attorney General. Are there any Republican attorneys general around the country who feel anywhere close to what you and a lot of your Democratic colleagues feel?
Well, I think that, you know, we do work on a lot of fronts. We're working on the opioid matters, as you know. We've talked about that.
How about guns?
On this issue, though, I've been disappointed. I've been really disappointed. You know, it took an awful lot to get any agreement from a Republican colleague with respect to bump stocks after Nevada. And that was, you know, when the Nevada shooting happened, I put people from the Attorney General's office on a plane, our victim services folks, and sent them to Las Vegas to help. And I thought that we'd see more of an effort there, more opportunity for bipartisan action in the face of that. Great to see Governor DeWine act today. We need more of that, and certainly I will be encouraging that of my Republican colleagues.
But yeah, another Republican governor is just to the north of us. And when you read statistics, I know you know these quite well from the Boston police, half of the guns used in gun crimes in Boston don't come from here. They come from Maine and New Hampshire with lax laws. Until the feds act, it's critical that places like New Hampshire belly up to the bar.
Exactly why Mitch McConnell needs to do his job. For once, please, Mitch, just do your job for once. In the face of the carnage and the destruction and the devastation, bring forward a couple of the bills that are already out there. There's one on background checks. There's one on waiting periods. There are red flag bills and others. I mean, there are
Why don't the Democrats pass a bill in the House on assault weapons? My thesis is they don't think they have the votes because some moderate Democrats aren't going to join with the majority of Democrats, and they'd be embarrassed and defeated. Why don't they go back into session tomorrow and pass an assault weapons ban and put it on Mitch McConnell's desk?
Well, I think that the House Democrats have brought forward legislation. They're going to continue to do that. I think that the focus on background checks, comprehensive nationwide background checks, waiting periods, and the like is so important because it's Jim, it's true. I mean, 60% of the guns that turn up in crimes here in Massachusetts come from other states. And until and unless we have a more comprehensive, sensible solution, which, by the way, the majority of Americans, Democrat and Republican, support, we're not going to be where we need to be.
The majority of the NRA supports it, too. Can we come back to Massachusetts and turn to 7 other unnecessary deaths closer to home? 7 motorcyclists in New Hampshire killed, allegedly, by a driver who should have had his license suspended, had a violation notice from Connecticut been processed by the Registry of Motor Vehicles. You've started an investigation into the trucking company, Westfield Transport. What are you looking at?
Well, we're looking at the operations and really looking at this industry, and we have concerns based on what we know about how this person came to be hired, questions about whether the screening was appropriate and the like. It's an ongoing criminal investigation.
Criminal.
So I'm limited in what I can say, but I'll tell you this, Jim. I mean, this is outrageous. It is just shameful what transpired, and a really gross...
At the Registry?
At the Registry. I mean, unacceptable. To not have those papers processed, to not have the issue identified and the resources put in place. And obviously there's a hard look at that now, and steps I'm sure will be taken. But my God, I think most of us were shocked to learn that this is what was happening within our own registry.
I had the 2 legislators who were leading the investigation in the Senate and House Transportation Committee, the Joint Committee. When you said there's possible action, is there possible action vis-a-vis RMV employees who apparently knew that the documents were not being processed but didn't act? Is there possible investigation on your part against them?
Well, we'll see. I mean, right now...
Could there be?
There
are people in Michigan, public officials, who knew about the water crisis, didn't act, they were criminally prosecuted.
Well,
Could these people be criminally prosecuted?
We'll see. And I think that, you know, as Attorney General, my job is to make sure we're doing everything we can to make sure that those who have engaged in acts that are criminal, engaged in acts that cause harm to people, are held accountable.
Are you looking at the RMV?
I'm not going to make any predictions right now.
Are you looking at the RMV?
I'm certainly been reviewing what's happening over there. I watched the testimony, as you did, a couple couple weeks ago. We continue to learn more. We'll await the findings of that internal investigation. But boy, what a serious case of lack of leadership, lack of management, lack of accountability that apparently may have contributed to serious and devastating harm.
Lack of leadership by whom, Attorney General?
The administration.
From Charlie Baker on down?
Well, ultimately he's responsible, but certainly within the RMV, terrible mismanagement.
Maura Healey, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Great to see you, Jim.
Attorney General Healey.